So this afternoon we're going to concentrate on getting all you folks up to speed for being able to present your science and its excitement and why it's important in a politician meeting tomorrow. We're going to start off with a panel of previous SmP alumni, and this is to be chaired by Dr. Jeremy Brownlie, who's Secretary of the STA from Griffith University and just in receipt of good reviews on his latest paper. That's right. Jeremy.
Jim. I'll start again. Okay, so we've got Professor Mark Hutchison here. He's the Director for ARC Centre of Excellence for Nanoscale BioPhotonics, and is a professor within the School of Medicine at the University of Adelaide and conducts research into neuroimmunopharmacology. And he's also a board member of STA and represents the Medical and Cognitive Sciences Cluster and has attended a number of Science Meets Parliament events. 2 or 3?
I think this is my third.
Okay, excellent.
I think. 3? Yeah, I think it's 3.
We've also got Chrystal Evans here. She's appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the BioMelbourne network, 2014 now, and has 15 years experience as a biomedical researcher herself. She's also highly active, so for those of you who engage in Twitter, you'd certainly know her from her Twitter feed, and has been very passionate and very engaged in the advocacy space. So she's the founding member and chair of the Australian Academy of Sciences Early and Mid-Career Research Forum. In 2011 was an active leader of the Discoveries Needs Dollars campaign, and even led one of the rallies down in Melbourne, and also communicates science and engages through the Melbourne community radio community down there. So please welcome our panellists today. Okay, so Krystal, I'd like to start with you. We're all pretty busy, writing grants at the moment, dealing with student emails and all that sort of stuff. So why should we be engaged in this space, and what's sort of the reason for engaging through SmP?
Well, I was an SmP alumni of 2011, which is 5 years ago, which actually, gave me pause to look back and think about what the science and policy landscape looked like in 2011. It was a time when we could never imagine the Prime Minister of Australia using the word science and innovation, let alone having them on the front page of every national newspaper. So I think that in some ways a lot has changed over the last 5 years. I feel that scientists have embraced their voice. And I think for me that was the biggest reason for being involved in Science Meets Parliament. Because as a scientist, as you say, writing grants, doing experiments, writing papers, very engaged on a day-to-day basis in moving small amounts of colourless liquid from one tube to another, you sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture. And I guess back in 2011, when there was concerns that there might be cuts to the health and medical research budget, it kind of struck me, well, who speaks for me? Who represents me? How do I get representation at a higher level? How can my voice count in a bigger way than just being one person? And so that's why engaging in Science Meets Parliament was really, I think, the start of my awareness and interest and engagement at a really deeper level with scientists in the political sort of sphere. And so for me, 2011, that Science Meets Parliament experience, created that first engagement in how you can be an effective voice and effective advocate for science.
Mark, have you got, obviously this is your third SmP, so you're sort of a heavy user of SmP now. What brings you back each year?
So I've done a lot of media communications work before, and I thought I knew how to talk to politicians because I could talk on TV and I could talk on radio. And I remember coming in and sitting in on the first morning and thinking, I know all of this, this is all fine, just give me a politician to talk to. And realised very quickly I had no idea about the policy side of the engagement story. I didn't realise that there were so many levels of the department that you had to engage with to enact change. And then I didn't realise that politicians are extremely intelligent people who are very good at things that I'm not very good at. And I need to give them credit for that, so that when I'm going in to have an intelligent conversation with them, they will take away a lot from that meeting with me and with you, and therefore you need to be very careful about what you try to communicate across. And so what Brian was talking about this morning, not whinging and not whining, is really, really important, because you do, for that 15, 20 minutes, represent all scientists, despite in this room we are as diverse as any other non-scientific discipline. So we will be representing the voice of science to that particular parliamentarian for that particular point in time, and they will take away a lot from that engagement. And I still am following the Twitter feed of the person that I met in the first year. I know that Mel McDowell somewhere here gets hugs from Karen Andrews, who she saw last year, because they met at Science Meets Parliament. So not bad if you're getting hugs from the Parliamentary Secretary for Science. So that's what can come out of this.
Excellent. So apart from putting your head in the sand, how might we prepare then for tomorrow's meeting?
I guess you have to have some good news story to tell and sell in the simplest, most impactful way that maintains scientific integrity. Because you can say, we cured cancer, but actually you stopped the division of cancerous cells in vitro in a cell culture dish, right? You don't want to be overselling it. And yet you want to be communicating that what you are doing is exciting. There are other people working with you who are excited. You're internationally recognised for what you do, and that people who are out there in the community who know nothing about science are excited about the fact that you are doing the science that you're doing, and therefore you, parliamentarian in front of me, should care about this, because other people who are going to vote you in next time are going to care.
Yeah, I think it comes back to some of the issues that were raised in the earlier session on public policy about this is your opportunity to start a relationship, and that it's your chance to begin to position yourselves as that trusted source of expertise. I always think that wouldn't it be great if every politician had like a dialer scientist, so that if anything floated across their desk, that they could just go, oh, I know someone who'll know something about that. I'll just give Mark a call. And even if it's about volcanoes or malaria or whatever it is, it's still science. And again, that comes back to that piece around being an expert and having expert opinion and considered scientific opinion. But I think it's fantastic if you can start to build a relationship with a politician, because politicians are people. And I think that the most important thing that you can do tomorrow is sell your story, but also create an opportunity for ongoing engagement. Because I think in my job now, I'm the CEO of the BioMelbourne network, and I work at the interface of research, business and government, but mostly from a business and industry perspective. We're a business and industry network for biotechnology and medical technology. So I take a lot of meetings with politicians, and a lot of the time they've been briefed by their staff, they've seen the issues paper. You sit down to meet with them and you think, all right, I'm going to tell them everything about this. And they're like, yeah, I know, what do you want me to do? And that question, what do you want me to do, is where you need to create the space to give them an opportunity to buy in. You've told them how important the problem is, or you've told them how exciting the science is, you've told them what could and would be done, and then you have to put an ask on the end. You have to say, well, what is it that I would like now? Because I've told you how great, how important, how interesting, how globally significant what I do is. This is what you can do to make a difference. And so you create a little bit of buy-in that goes both ways. And so I'd challenge you, so imagine your meeting goes incredibly well. The politician you're meeting with gets what you're saying, absolutely tunes into it, sees the significance, and they turn to you and they say, what would you like me to do? You've got to have an answer. You've got to have something that they can do, some way they can participate, and that you can then move that relationship forwards.
So I would say it is spectacular if you get a what can I do? And I've had that happen before and completely floundered. And I'm guessing many of you are thinking, I don't have a fully prepared policy document that I can put on the table. The best thing you can then say is, well, listen, when are you going to be in insert your hometown local academic institution here? I'd love to have you come and visit so we can continue this dialogue and you can see firsthand what we do. Because they're not going to take a fully prepared policy document, but they will come and visit. And it's on that second and third time that they actually engage, it's where you then become that trusted person that you're on your home turf and they've come to see you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the other thing that people also maybe might not be considering is the very critical role of politicians' staff and their advisors, because a lot of the time they're the day-to-day person who can be your internal champion in that office. So if you get into your meeting tomorrow and your politician who your meeting is running late, and the staffer says, "Well, I'm going to start the meeting," don't be disappointed. This is actually probably a fantastic thing, because this person is in some ways your day-to-day contact. You know, this is the person who's the doer. And so in some ways, building a relationship with a politician is really deepened by then having that engagement with their staff. So if they have to leave early or if they turn up late and you're talking with their office, fantastic. This person is actually in your target audience as well as your elected representative.
And I can guarantee that that will happen to probably a third of the people here. Certainly the meetings that I've had with politicians, I've had politicians have to leave because there'll be a vote or a division either in the Senate or the House chamber, and so they'll have to get up and run out, or as you said, they're running late. And certainly carrying on that conversation with the Chief of Staff or their policy advisor is quite critical. So with the meeting tomorrow, so there'll be a group of, say, 3 or 4 of us going into that room. How might we, we've all got our thoughts around, okay, I'm doing, this type of work and I've just had fantastic news from PLOS pathogens or whatever it is, and I'm very excited about telling that story. But as a group, should we be trying to craft a message together, or what's sort of your take on the group dynamic going into tomorrow's meeting?
I think that, and I saw lots of huddles happening over lunch, which is fantastic, people talking about what they do. I think everyone, in the group wants to have their own chance to talk about their own individual work, and politicians take these meetings every day. So relax, they know how it works, even if you don't. So when you go in, you have a seat, it's under control, don't be nervous, these things happen every day. And so it's, you'll all have a chance to introduce yourselves, to talk a bit about yourselves. I think the most important thing that you can do as a group is be united and mutually supportive of each other. And because, again, as Jeremy said, and Mark said, you're representing all of science, and we want to give a cohesive impression of how scientists can work together. And so be very careful not to speak at cross purposes, not to contradict each other. I was in a meeting once with 3 people and I said something and someone else in the group said, "Oh, that's not true," and blah, 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 and started to debate me in front of the elected representative. That's not cool. So, if you do want to, educate that person outside the meeting, fantastic, but please remember who else is in the room. So I think, obviously being mutually respectful and courteous of each other, but I think that there are a lot of, when it comes down to it, there are a lot of messages that we can all sign up to, and I think that a lot of the conversations tomorrow will be around the NISA, the National Innovation and Science Agenda. So have a think about how your conversation sits on the current political landscape, about what else is going on. They might ask you your opinion of, well, how does what you do fit in with NISA? Or how does what you do relate to what's currently going on in the broader sort of social context? So there are ways that we can all engage with that sort of deeper narrative around the importance of science and evidence and research in our community.
Mark, any?
Yeah, I guess the temptation always is when you're going to the scientific conference is you start out with the first slide, which is my science is better than yours, and therefore pay attention to this talk more than any other talk. And that is definitely not how you want to start out this conversation. You want to be able to go in and have that simple yet generous message across the 3 people that are in the meeting with you, perhaps. There may be one person who will try to guide the conversation. The parliamentarian may wish to take that upon themselves, and you may have, I'm going to speak first, this one's going to speak second, and that person's going to speak third, and then you sit down and then they go, okay, let's randomise that completely, and people get thrown off. Yeah. You just have to go with the flow, and the key thing is that have an idea of perhaps 3 key messages and a few buzzwords that get worked into the message. Clearly, NISA is going to be one of those key messages. Clearly, science is exciting could be one of those other messages, and that things have really changed under the current establishment. But you have to then play with the conversation as it goes, and it may be that you had agreed upon one person was going to speak about NISA, but that person got asked about something completely different, and you don't want to then hog the limelight for too long, because you want to share it around.
Absolutely. Okay, so if we're in a situation where perhaps the three of us are meeting MP X, and we've gone through our 2 to 3 minute spiels that we've crafted after the next session, and there's a bit of a lull in the meeting, and you sort of get the sense that there might still be a bit of time. What would you do to continue the conversation?
I'd ask them what they're interested in. What excites them? What's happening in their region? If you know a little bit about where they're from, I'm assuming all of you have done your homework. If you know who your parliamentarian is, like where their electorate is, what's happening there. But I think there's nothing more engaging than asking someone else what makes them happy. What makes you happy? I mean, these parliamentarians didn't have to take these meetings. Everyone you're meeting with tomorrow wanted to. And so they've asked for the meeting for a reason, and so exploring that, saying, well, what is it that you're looking for? What interests you? How can I be valuable to you? And so I think it's about creating some value around understanding what your customer wants. And in this case, your customer is your MP. Understanding what they want and what they need, and how you can be a part of delivering that.
Yeah. Absolutely, you have to take it to, if that opportunity opens up, I doubt it will happen, because they love to talk.
True.
But if that opportunity does arise and you have that opportunity to guide the conversation, then absolutely ask which scientific establishment is in your district that you've visited recently, or have you been to my place before? And then that opens up that opportunity again, saying, well, if you haven't, come now, or if you have, come back again, because getting them in the door the second time is the key.
Yeah, and I think too, as Brian said this morning, it's also an opportunity to get some feedback about what they're thinking. Obviously there's a lot of policy development going on in both, or all of the major parties at the moment in the run-up to the election, and it's not that they're going to spill the beans and give you something that's top secret or anything like that, but you can certainly get an impression of where either that individual MP or perhaps more broadly that party is thinking about science, and perhaps what their frustrations might be with scientists. I've certainly had that feedback from politicians where they've said, you guys are too timid, or you're too focused, or you're too much in your box, and they're wanting to I guess, be more engaged. So that was sort of some useful feedback from politicians anyway. So if we've gone through the process, we've had our meeting, what's the best way to finish off the meeting, Mark?
I have found that if there's the opportunity to invite them to come and visit, or if they're never going to come and visit you where you are, identify a location where you have a collaborator who could have them come and visit them. So that they can see something about the science that you have. That would be spectacular, and that provides that opportunity for another conversation. There may also be the opportunity to say, I didn't know the answer to your question, so we visited with Senator Milne, the head of the Greens last year, when she was, and she asked us about silver nanoparticles in Japan and the toxicity this was doing to the environment. And we were sitting there going, no idea, but we can find you that answer, just give us a few hours. So we actually went out and found the resources and sent her advisor the details and the scientific papers, and we got a lovely letter back saying thanks very much. So if there's an open question, provide that response. If there's an opportunity to have an invitation for them to visit, get it out there.
Yeah.
Can I add something there? Is this mic working?
You got to turn it on.
You're working? I've turned it on.
Yeah, that'll be fine. It'll work.
Can anyone hear me? It's so great when someone comes on the stage and then gets in the way, isn't it? That's an opening. That's an opening. When you get to the end of the meeting and they ask you a question you haven't got the answer for, that's an opening to make another connection with them. That's almost as good as, in fact, it's better than knowing the answer to the question yourself, because it means you then get the advisor's details. Don't try and email the parliamentarian. Yeah. Get the advisor's details, and you then might just set up an interesting dialogue. If you can, as Mark just suggested, get that information, not the next day or the day after, straight away. straight away. Come back to us.
That 3-hour cycle.
Absolutely. So come back to us. If you can't work out how to do it, we will help you. It just means that they will think, wow, not only were they polite, quick, interesting, but they're dynamic as well. It makes a real impression if a parliamentarian asks you a question and you can't answer it and you come back within, as 3-hour cycle. I love the way you have a little word for everything. 3-hour cycle, says Hutchinson. That's absolutely gold.
And I would definitely, within that window, follow up with an email regardless. So I would 100% at the end of your meeting, that day, that night, before you go home, when you get on the plane, write an email. It could be reflecting back, what you talked about. It could be following up on opportunity. It could be referring on to other resources. But always, then write another email. And I just always keep that communication chain open.
And I guess about keeping that communication chain open, say 3 months out, 6 months out, should we still be hassling these people?
I think that what it does is create a little reference point, and I think that any time in the future you can go back and go, dear Senator X, we met during SmP 2016. They won't remember, or they might not remember, but at least you've created a reference point for which they can go, oh yeah, And so what it does is it creates a little marker, if you like, that you can always refer back to. I think the other thing we didn't touch on that we wanted to talk about was the dinner tonight. Mark, did you want to talk about that?
I can.
Because there are going to be politicians in the room and at your table. So also be prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was probably one of the things I was least prepared for the first SmP that I attended, was really focused about the meeting on the following day. I sat through all of the very interesting talks and panel discussions, and then thought, oh yeah, we'll just have this dinner. And then all of a sudden,
you walk into Parliament House and there's wine and beer.
There is that too, yeah. So
and you have that before dinner.
That's right. So
you're milling around and you're looking at the list of people, and I've got no idea. Those names kind of look familiar.
Yeah.
You get to the table and you think, I've just had 2 beers. There is a minister on the table. I have no idea. I'm not prepared. Phone is out, putting names in, searching for this person on Wiki to try and work out who they are.
Yeah, and I guess at least you recognise that they're a minister. I didn't even realise that the person on my table was a politician. So I sort of said, oh, so what do you do? And they started talking about, Geelong and all this sort of stuff, and the high containment facility down there. I was like, oh, okay, what sort of work do you do? And he's like, no, actually, I'm the Member of Parliament for that area. So I was like, oh, okay, sorry about that. So
we convened this because I thought we'd get some fantastic prepared answers to how they dealt with stuff. There will be a parliamentarian or 2 on every single table tonight. So if you miss out on one, it's because they didn't turn up. They're certainly all down there. I'm sorry we can't give you the names ahead so you can do that
There's a trick
under the table now. But, go to the toilet and do it.
Get in the room early, walk around with your phone on, and walk around with the video going and look at the name cards, and then you can come back later on, and rather than look like an idiot picking up everybody's name cards on the table, you've got their names, you can quickly look them up, and then you're set to go.
Okay, so there's not a name card on every table. However, there is a list.
There's a list.
Alphabetical, and there's a list of tables, so have a good look at your list. And I mean, it's not unusual not to recognise the name of a parliamentarian. There's an awful lot of new ones in there. I have to look them up. So have a look at your list and just do a bit of Googling beforehand. And, if you don't know and if you can't tell which one they are, just make conversation and work it out. Yeah. And in most cases, I mean, especially the ones who come, they won't come because they don't want to have a chat. They want to have a chat. Mm-hmm. The bit of advice I'd add to, you've had tons of brilliant advice from these guys so far. Knowing the parliamentarian that you're seeing in the meeting, but also on the table, is really handy. If you don't have time to do much else, try and have a look at what they've been doing that day, because they have so little sleep. They have not a whole lot of support. What they've been doing that day is what they're thinking about that minute. So if they've had a massive fight in question time, or if they've had a couple of bills going through, or if there's been a fair bit of action in their area, the first thing that you can raise in conversation with them, probably not in your meeting, it's got pretty scant time, but at dinner or at drinks or anything else, is, oh, I heard you in question time, that was pretty brutal. And then off they go, they tell you all their stuff, and then they ask about what you do. So just be aware that you're walking into it. It's a great big bubble up there. It's a big bubble in which you don't see that much outside. So have a look into the bubble and see if you can see what your person you're seeing has been doing that day or in the last couple of days. And that's an immediate, instant conversation starter when you've got those in the lift, standing up at the drinks. You know, also, frankly, if you're really not quite sure who they are, and, you know, many of them look quite similar too, it's quite difficult, you can just sort of, you know, work out whether they're a House or a Senator and mention something about question time. It's always a sure opener.
But so I'll just sort of finish off with a pretty open-ended question, which is, so for both of you, what have you gotten out of by engaging with politicians? Has it supported your research, your institution?
I think for me, well, I'll answer the question in a slightly different way in terms of what I got out of Science Meets Parliament, was actually the other people in the room. So I actually met a few people at Science Meets Parliament 2011, who I then went on to do other advocacy work with, who I then, you know, was able to build my professional and personal network with. So I would say there's incredible value with networking with your peers, and I think creating those peer-to-peer relationships with people who get it, with people who you may touch base with then throughout your career, who you go, if someone says, I don't know anything about silver nanoparticles, but I know someone who does. I mean, it's again, setting yourself up as that expert, but who has access to a network of other expertise. So I'd say that. I'd also say that I now look at the role that I'm in. I'm no longer a medical research scientist, and I think it was having that insight and interest into Science Meets Parliament. I went and did an internship at Adam Bant's office, where I got even a greater sort of exposure to what's happening. And there's a fantastic researcher in residence program that the Biomedical Research Victoria runs now in Victoria. So there are further opportunities that you can look from. You know, to this couple of days is a window, and I think it also opens up opportunity to think, well, how do I then follow this up? I also, after Science Meets Parliament, took the initiative of writing to my local member and say, well, I didn't meet you, but I went to Science Meets Parliament. And again, it's another way of just leveraging more opportunity out of these 2 days. So you don't just come to Canberra, do something nice and go home again. So I invited my local member to come and visit my Medical Research Institute, and I invited, you know, and I created a morning tea where everyone who was employed in his electorate who worked in that institute could come and meet their local member at our Medical Research Institute. So there's lots of things that you can do that to keep the momentum of Science Meets Parliament all throughout the year. So I would, you know, so that's something else that you can do is write to your local member. And I would really say use your democracy. I mean, you're a citizen as well as a scientist. You can go and make an appointment to meet your local MP to talk about issues. You can get on the phone, you can email them, you can start to build up relationships. And I think that, again, having a little touch point of, I went to Science Meets Parliament and now I'm going to do, you know, it just creates a little bit of a framework for you to support you in your ongoing relationships with elected representatives.
So,
We'll just quickly go and then we'll come to questions.
Sure.
Yep.
So for me, when I first came, I was a lowly postdoc, and now I'm a director of the Centre of Excellence. I get KPIs for talking to politicians. If I didn't do Science Meets Parliament, I can guarantee I would not be the director of the Centre of Excellence, because you have no experience with this political stuff. So why would we give you this job? So this opportunity opens many doors. This is Canberra. Not all of us live in Canberra. We have our local politicians. Universities and most academic institutions are quite political environments. And so the skills that you learn here can be applied across the domains, outside of the political sphere and down even into the local institutions. So definitely engage with your local Member of Parliament. Definitely get your students, if you have students in your lab, to start thinking about engaging with their local Members of Parliament so that things get out.
Just got a question? Can we just...
Mark over here.
The other thing is follow the politicians on Twitter, because that's a great way to maintain a conversation with them. Yeah. Seriously.
Did we already ask who in the room's on Twitter?
Who has tweeted their poly yet?
Oh,
tweet your Polly this afternoon. Say, I'm seeing you tomorrow. I'm really excited. Who doesn't have a Twitter account? Okay, you need to sign up for Twitter, people, even if it's just for this.
Yeah.
Michael, take lessons.
Masterclass. Yep.
Hi, yeah, thanks. What's the difference between meeting a government MP and an opposition MP?
Today's opposition could be tomorrow's elected representative. Yeah. I guess you would have to have a look at what it is that you're trying to influence. I think that if you're in government, obviously, how do I say?
They've certainly got to be somewhat nuanced in what they can talk about, whereas I find oppositions have a bit more freedom to talk, but it's still within a party line. The most exciting meeting I ever took was last year, and it was Jacqui Lambie, and she is what you see on TV is what she is in the office, but she's got a heart of gold and very passionate. But because she is an independent, she's not constrained by the party, so she can just talk about anything and hold a position on anything. And actually, she was one of the most productive meetings I've ever had as well.
I think it's also really interesting to look at what committees your politicians might serve on, because there's a lot of standing committees that backbenchers and people who aren't ministers, like you might find that someone serves on the committee for biosecurity or the committee for land. There's all kinds of standing committees that they might serve on that might have issues that come up that are heavily science related. I guess, and the other thing is the parliamentary friends groups. There are a lot of, my first meeting in 2011 was with Judy Moylan, who convened the Parliamentary Friends of Diabetes. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm from a medical research institute. We've got some leading diabetes research. I armed myself up. I walked in there and said, oh, I can tell you all about what's happening at WeHi. And she said, oh yeah, I met with Len last week. And I was like, oh, okay. Good. So it helps you to learn what they're interested in as well, independent of whether they're in government currently or not.
And can I add to that what Jeremy said about people being more or less constrained when they're in government or not in government is a very good point. But keep in mind, you're not a paid lobbyist, you're a scientist going in to tell them about what it is that fills your head every day. What makes you tick, what you love, what contribution it makes to Australian society and the Australian economy. Every person you see is the same on that basis. If what you do has some particularly intensely controversial relationship with something that the government minister you are seeing is dealing with that minute, then come and talk to us up the back and we'll help you deal with that. It's fine, just go for it anyway, but you might want to think about it on that level. But otherwise, they're all people. They're all people, and you're going in to tell them about what you really love doing. Just keep that in the front of your mind.
I guess the other thing I'd add is that there's always a diversity of opinion within any political party. And so you are very much dealing with individuals. And so whilst there is party line, you might find that there are different pockets of interest within any political party. So you can't necessarily assume that it's a homogeneous mix of opinion.
So just over here. We got a question? No? Okay.
Come on, people. More questions.
All right.
I got a pretty loud voice. So I think
it's got to be on camera.
Hang on.
Just
Sorry.
1 second. Sorry, it's got to be on camera.
Sorry, open my mouth again. Just wondering, quick question: has the MP chosen us? As we were sort of trying to puzzle out over the lunch break, why, what links us all together?
So now the hour-long explanation of the meeting matching procedure begins. I'll make this really quick. In many cases, parliamentarians are keen to meet any scientist. They don't actually mind what your topic area of speciality is. They're the really easy ones. We ask the parliamentarians to elect 3 areas they're interested in. We ask you to do exactly the same thing. So that gives us some idea of what they've expressed interest in, some idea of what it is you guys are capable of talking about. So then we do Tim does the matchy-matchy electronic genius process. Then we add what knowledge we have of parliamentarians, their general likes and wants. So no, they haven't chosen you. We have chosen you on their behalf. To be completely honest, you don't want them to choose you. It would take us 10 years to get every Science Meets Parliament together. And also, frankly, given your diversity of interests and their diversity of interests, it would just be a complete nightmare. But again, you're not This is different to most political meetings. Most political meetings, you will have sent them I am coming to see you about this particular issue. This is not what you're going to see the parliamentarians about. You're going to see them as part of a large group that are going to talk about science broadly. So we've given you some guidelines, so you've got some idea of the interests they've expressed, but they're not looking for a sort of, a pot of gold at the end of the meeting. And they're also not waiting for you to ask for money, because it's a sure out the door right now, thank you very much. So it's nice that you match a bit, but really you're there to represent yourself, your ideas, the contribution you make to the economy, rather than solve a problem like the problem, say, that Shubo and Emily were talking about before.
I think too, there's also a number of really good souls within the Parliament that will always take meetings with scientists of any flavour because they're genuinely interested in science. So there's been times where I've met with one of those senators, and it was a pretty eclectic mix of researchers. We couldn't work out how we all got there, but once we got in the meeting, it was quite clear she was very, very passionate about science. So here.
Just a silly question. How much it helps to know to which party the member belongs? Because I know it happened a few years back that somebody was talking with a member, and after 15 minutes he said, sorry, I'm not from the Labour Party. And he said, I didn't know that you were from Liberal. And he said, no, I'm from Nationals, actually. Yeah. So is it, does it help?
It's probably courtesy to at least have that baseline level of knowledge. Yeah, you should certainly know that, even to the point of perhaps knowing what part of the country that person's representing. Any other?
If you haven't done any research, do panic now. If you still haven't done any research tomorrow, don't tell me. But the part of the building we're in has a whole bunch of little terminals with all the senators and members on them. Go to the machines and look them up. I mean, you must not walk into a meeting not knowing what party they're from. You just must not. I don't think anyone in the room is going to disagree with me on that, are they? No? And it's just, bad move number one. And do find out where they come from, because it just makes an enormous amount of difference. If you know what football team they support, gee, that's pretty handy too. If you happen to support the same one or an opposing one, or you know whether they won last week or not, or something about them personally, read their first speech. The first easiest, cheatingest way of working out what a poll is like is read their first speech. Every single one of them has it on their website, so they're not hard to find. It'll take you 15 minutes.
I would say the easiest, cheatingest way to find out what your parliamentarian is interested in is see if they have a Twitter account and look at what they tweet about. That is actually the most instant way of doing it. And most politicians these days have accounts which they either operate themselves or by staffers. You don't have to be on Twitter to look at Twitter. So if you don't have a Twitter account, that's okay. You can still read it. So I would definitely have a look about what they've been tweeting about, because it's a perfect conversation starter. It might show you what football team they follow or what issues they care about, or even if in their scroll back through their feed and see if there's anything science related. It'll give you a great insight into how they think and what they care about. So Twitter is political gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Just over here. Just while the mic's getting out, I'd have to say that we had to organise a meeting at the very last minute while people at the media lunch, National Press Club, thank you. And all of a sudden this person sort of jumped out, and we had no idea what this person wanted, and we just looked at their Twitter feed and realised that they were from Western Australia. They're mad keen around astronomy, and so we sort of madly found astrophysicists who got very excited that they had another meeting. So we've got a question here.
Not everyone thinks in the same way that scientists do, especially a lot of politicians, in that here's the evidence and this is exactly what we're going to do about it because that's what all the evidence says. So how do you sell your science or science to someone that doesn't necessarily think the same way you do?
Do you want to have a...
Yeah. At the end of the day, these people are there because they believe they can serve their electorate that has elected them into the place. Therefore, they've got some connection to their electorate. And almost everything we do, in fact, I think everybody here could say something about how their science is going to impact an everyday Australian. And there's going to be one person in each of those electorates at least who is going to be impacted to the smallest amount by at least something about everybody's science. So draw it down to the simplest measure as that there is, and yeah, I met with the member who happens to have University of Queensland in their electorate. They were really interested in what was happening at the University of Queensland. I'm at the University of Adelaide. I got no idea, but there's a lot of scientists who live and a lot of students who live there. So I talk to them around that topic. You have to find that common ground. And the classic thing that the media people keep doing is keep saying, you make a statement about your science and then they say, and why should I care? And then you just have somebody keep coming back to you and saying, why should I care? And it's entirely reductionist, and you come out with a two-word statement that is the essence of your science. That's how you connect.
And that's what they remember when you've gone. So don't worry about trying to think like them. Just trying to help them remember what you do and why it matters. So that, why do we care thing. I mean, if you spend your life trying to think like a politician, you never know, you might change careers.
Sophie? Hang on a sec.
Yeah, we've heard two sort of sets of advice here, one being that we're all individuals with our own voices and there'll be an eclectic group in each meeting. But the other advice is that there has to be some sort of alignment within that group, and Mark's suggesting that we'll likely have three messages, number one being related to NISA. So how can we reconcile being individuals and being in a group?
I think it's all about explaining how you fit into the bigger picture. We're all part of a very big picture in terms of science and innovation in Australia. And so I guess that comes back to that word collaboration. And I think we do look at how we interrelate and interconnect. And as a nation, I think that our scientific capacity is greatened by all those pieces coming together. So I think that there's definitely a way of putting an individual story into a broader context around the value and significance of science and research in Australia.
Yeah, and I think we should all be able to speak to some part of the NISA statement. So you can align your own stories underneath that and identify where the benefits will come out of that once all the details come out of the system. So absolutely, we're not trying to clone you, or you don't want to be clones. You don't want to be speaking in one autonomous voice. You do want to have some flavours, some colours in the conversation, but you don't want it to be so multi-messaged and so many acronyms and so much science that they come out of there going, I'd much prefer to be in question time.
I don't want to contradict someone on the panel, because we've just said that is a golden mustn't do rule, and I'm not directly contradicting you.
Contradict me.
This is not a groupthink exercise at all. I'd be actually, frankly, quite happy if you didn't, expressing support for the fact that the government is taking a much more forward-looking approach to science and innovation. That's a good thing. You don't need to know the details of the announcement. But if you do, that's great. I wouldn't hammer on about it, frankly. You're there to talk about the science that you do and the difference that makes. This is not a political re-education of a room full of 200 people to support the government's current agenda. That's on film, isn't it?
I've got Birmingham tomorrow, so I have to talk about this. Right?
The second message is everyone's obsessed with their own meeting. Hutchinson is obsessed with his own meeting. He is seeing the minister responsible for the package. You can hear it bleeding out of him, can't you?
I may have read it this morning.
Yes, indeed. So don't feel you've got to toe a particular political line while you're in there, but at the same time, this meeting is not a meeting to be making statements about your political views. There are plenty of other forums to do that in. It'll be the first way of losing the attention of the person you've got and losing their attention to the message about the greatness of the science. If you go, but you're a Labor, Liberal, Green, whatever.
I think genuinely it's a time when we can say that science and innovation does have cross-party support. I don't think that the people we're meeting with tomorrow will be anyway combative in terms of understanding the importance of science. I think that that's almost taken as read, and they really are interested in you as people and your stories and your experiences and your challenges, and again what it is that they can do to help you or to help their electorate, the people who live in their electorate. And so I think it is about connecting back at that personal level that's really going to have the impact.
Well, I think we'll close the discussion. The final piece of advice I give you is this really is the beginning of a conversation. It's an opportunity to meet with highly intelligent, often high emotional quotient sort of people. They're very engaging. One comment that always comes back from delegates is, I can't believe how nice they were to me. I'm not quite sure if they thought it was going to be like question time or something, but...
they're not like what they are like on the
exactly.
TV.
They're nothing like what you see on TV.
My Polly last year got kicked out in question time for yelling, so it was awesome.
Even better.
He's great.
Anyway, well, if you've got any further questions, please come and talk to any of us over the next sort of day and a half. But I'd like to close the session and thank the two speakers. Thanks.